Hi, my name is Marco Simon and I'm the expert. I'm going to tell you why the UK supermarket shelves are empty of some fruits and vegetables. You might have noticed the lack of tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, and other fruits and vegetables in your local supermarket recently. This is happening all over the UK, with some supermarkets even restricting the number of these items that you can buy per customer. Nowadays, there seems to be an international supply chain problem in about every industry, but this one seems to be affecting the UK particularly badly. There is not just one single reason for this. This instead is due to a number of reasons, which the Sunday Times laid rather beautifully in one of the articles recently. Problem number one is problems with supplies from Morocco. So, following Brexit, the UK and Morocco signed the UK Morocco Association Agreement, which is a form of trade agreement aimed at reducing trade friction, eliminating or reducing, in some cases, barriers like input duties, which for tomatoes, for example, went from a 8% input duty rate to just 3.5. This meant input duty for each £1 million worth of tomatoes imported into the UK from Morocco was reduced from £80,000 to £35,000. So that is a £45,000 per £1 million spent on tomatoes saving. If we consider the UK imported from Morocco last year about £156 million worth of tomatoes, the saving to the UK economy that the UK Morocco Association Agreement provided was just above £7 million. Although the UK EU TCA, the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, provides for a total elimination of the 8% input duty for tomatoes when coming in to the UK from the EU, so bringing it down all the way to zero. So in fact, deviating tomatoes imports from the EU to from Morocco in reality is costing the UK economy about £35,000 per £1 million of tomatoes imported more on input duty in this case, which meant last year it cost the UK shoppers a whopping £5.5 million worth of import duties on tomatoes. Having said that, as tomatoes are being sourced from Morocco cheaper than from Spain, the actual cost is balanced and not been that noticeably to the final consumer. In any way, even though Spain remains UK's number one supplier of tomatoes and other fruits and vegetables, the UK has developed a reliance for these supplies of tomatoes from Morocco. As Morocco has been badly affected by very poor weather conditions throughout the year, summer and winter, this has had a negative impact on tomatoes supply from the country. Reason number two, the weather in Spain. Even though Morocco has become an important player in the fruit and vegetable supply chain for the UK, Spain is still the UK's main supplier of vegetables, with imports from Spain nearing 10% of all UK vegetables import. Whilst southern Spain's winter months are usually warm enough to grow most vegetables, this year it has seen unprecedented cold, wet and windy weather, which has delayed crops. Reason number three is energy prices, which is affecting us all. Higher than usual energy prices have also had a role to play. Whilst sunny Spain and Morocco don't rely on artificial heating to grow their fruits and vegetables, the UK does, which has affected the ability of UK farmers to grow locally. You might have noticed the grown in Essex label in your tomatoes from time to time in the supermarkets. Most of Britain's tomatoes and cucumbers are grown in the greenhouses of Lee Valley on the Essex-Hertfordshire border. Under normal circumstances, they would have been able to make up for the shortages in supply chain, but high energy prices have made it unprofitable for UK farmers to run the gas boilers for their greenhouses. The few that planted started late to avoid coldest months. Number four is what I like to call the squeeze to the east. British supermarkets are historically quite tough on suppliers, always squeezing the suppliers to keep prices down and stay competitive, When the squeeze is too big, EU suppliers would rather prioritize other customers in the continent. This has been further made worse by the fact that Brexit has added more barriers to trade and input from the EU, forcing some fruit and vegetable suppliers to look just to other markets where trading conditions are better, mainly other EU member states. Reason number 5 is logistical challenges. So transporting tomatoes from Morocco to Britain involves 2 sea crossing, first over the Strait of Gibraltar into Spain and then over the Channel to Calais. Casablanca is one of the main growing regions of the Premier tomatoes, which is the kind that is produced for the export market in Morocco. So on top of the 2 sea crossings, a tomato from Casablanca will also travel around 2,690 kilometers by road. The entire journey takes between 4 to 6 days. Brexit has had a negative effect on transport costs. The number of empty trips from European hauliers delivering to the UK has increased because they struggle to pick up a return load as the UK exports to the EU has come down. The result of this is a reduction in supply and a subsequent increase in freight rates, since EU hauliers are pricing it up as a round trip. Other reasons for these price increases are quite straightforward. Additional barriers at the border, such as checks, increased waiting times, and additional paperwork are costly for producers. On top of these, recent strikes by Calais port workers, and by British border force workers added further delays that hit only British supermarkets. Reason number 6 is UK's just-in-time inventory system needs rethinking. Our just-in-time inventory system is a management strategy that aligns raw materials orders from suppliers directly with production schedules. So basically what it does is it aligns demand with supply. This strategy is followed by UK supermarkets to, among other things, reduce warehousing space and therefore cost. However, this intricate inventory system, when applied to fruits and vegetables, relied on 4 things mainly: cheap energy, constant availability, constant good weather, and no political disruption, all of which are now missing from the equation. Supermarkets dispute criticism of the just-in-time model, pointing to its resilience during COVID, for example, probably the biggest supply shock in peacetime. However, during COVID, we still enjoyed of most of the factors that I mentioned before. To some extent, we had cheap energy, constant availability, although the labour market was affected by COVID, constant good weather, and no political disruption, although Brexit had already started, obviously. Lastly, number 7 is Brexit itself. I have mentioned Brexit a few times already, and the reason is because even though this is not just down to Brexit, some suggest Brexit is very much at the center of it all, basically exacerbating the problem. Britain has been disproportionately negatively affected by the bad weather, which suggests Brexit is to blame. On the other hand, Ireland, which is an EU member state, was recently hit by salad shortages, making some say that the issue is not really Brexit, but bad weather and strikes. However, some industry insiders insist that the post-Brexit trading framework, which is riddled with new export documentation like custom clearance and health certificates, that companies shipping goods to the UK are now facing, means suppliers are now more likely to look for alternative, easier destinations on the continent. The fact is that no other country in continental Europe is experiencing this level of shortages being seen in the UK. Even UK, in the middle of war with Russia, has plenty of tomatoes and fruit vegetables. So what do you think? Let me know. Post your comments below.